everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from. We have attendees from all over the world. Thank you so much for being here today and participating in day 2 of the TestMu conference. I'm super excited to be hosting this panel today on evolution of testing in the age of DevOps. Now, DevOps is really near and dear to me, just like testing. Having been a developer and a tester myself, I've seen a lot of changes. I had joked about this in the last year's TestMu that I was a developer and a tester in the last century, not giving away my age. But today I'm going to be joined by industry leaders from different organizations. And just backstage, we were talking about, the experience everybody has. And I calculated in my head, that's more than 130 years of experience that this esteemed panel has of helping customers transform, look at quality engineering, modernize applications. And I'm sure in the next 50 to 60 minutes, we will definitely take away some golden nuggets. With that, let me introduce the panel that we have here today. I'll just go by the people I see on my screen right now. I just love being remote. I have Vikul Gupta. Vikul, who is the CTO and Executive Vice President of Qualitas. He joins us from Chicago in the US. We have Harleen Bedi. She's the Senior Industry Principal at Infosys. She joins us from Bangalore. We have Malika Fernandez, who's the Managing Director at Accenture. She also joins us from Bangalore. We have Asmita Parab. She's the Associate Director of Quality Engineering from UST Product Engineering Group. She joins us from Pune. And we have Bhushan Bagi, who's the GM for Quality Engineering and Modernizing Assurance from Wipro, who joins us from Bangalore again. Thank you so much, Vikul, Harleen, Malika, Smita, and Bhushan for taking the time out to be here and to share your experiences with the audience today.
Thanks,
so DevOps. Thanks. So DevOps, I know that's a very hot topic that everybody's been talking about. Personally, I've seen DevOps really accelerate over the last 6-7 years. In college, we were all taught different software engineering principles, waterfall model, etc. But I think the pace of software delivery, the pace of mobile apps, the pace of SaaS applications, internet applications, that's just accelerated how we ship software today. But not much is being talked about, what happens from a testing perspective as far as DevOps goes. So I'm going to kick off the panel with my first question to Harleen. How have you seen DevOps evolve in the context of testing over the years?
Yeah, thanks, Manish. So good morning and good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me here on the panel today. So very valid question, Manish, and like you were saying, we do not talk much and not much is said about from the testing perspective, right? When we say DevOps, somewhere it gets lost in that whole equation. And personally, from my experience, since I have also spent more than 2 decades and all my experience in this space of testing, and I've literally seen how even testing has evolved. And especially the testing has evolved since the onset of Agile. From last many years, we are hearing about Agile and furthermore, it has accelerated when we are seeing the increasing adoption from DevOps or DevSecOps. So now if you see the main outcome of this whole Agile DevOps, it's based upon the common priorities, right? What is a priority from the Agile point of view? If you look, it's a fast-paced, iterative delivery of quality software. So underlying principle of delivery of quality software still remains, but how do you make it fast-paced? How do you make it iterative? So that is, I think, one of the key thing. And with that, obviously, the kind of testing practices, because earlier, before Agile, there were different kind of practices which you have a lot of time to do testing. There was stipulated time which was given. But now with this whole agility, with the speed, it has amplified the need to bring the closer collaboration, right? So between the earlier, I think there were more siloed testing teams which could operate. But with this whole, DevOps and Agile, there has to be much more increased collaboration between the dev, between testing teams, between the operations team. So that's, I think, the first and foremost of the change that we have seen. Second, I think what we have seen is from the skill set perspective also, because earlier I think testers were required to know only the business knowledge and maybe certain testing tools which were specifically expected from them. But today, if you see, the whole equation has changed. The testers are very much, part of those squads. They are part of those teams, right? Very well integrated, and they need to understand even the code. So that's all the evolution of estates from the skill set point, which came into the picture, right? And we are seeing more and more of this acceleration, the change of level of automation that we have seen. Earlier it was mostly about the regression, that focus was on automation. There's a lot of change in the level of automation now that is expected, again because of that acceleration that is needed to reach the market faster. So the automation not only limited to regression, how you start from the right away from the progression, how do you integrate that whole thing into the pipeline, right? And so basically, if I have to conclude, the testing from the agile DevOps perspective is basically breaking the silos. Earlier, there was a team which was sitting doing testing and had a lot of time, but with this whole evolution, those silos have broken. There's more collaboration, and there's a need to do much more faster. And that's how, both from skill set and from the tooling perspective, we have changed. We have seen a huge change which has happened.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've had lots of conversations where developers are saying, I'm not able to merge my code because testing team is still working on it. That was not the case, a couple of years back, where the testing is happening and the product has shipped, right? So because of DevOps, I see a lot more control also coming in. So Harleen, you talked a lot about a very important topic, which is agile and DevOps. You use these two words. I'm going to take that from what you said and jump over to you, Bhushan. Now, a lot of people I speak to get confused. Does agile mean DevOps and vice versa?
See, agile is more like the one which gets you the speed, if I have to put it the methodology, and DevOps is more like the tool chain, right? So both have to come together to make it happen. Think of agile testing team as the pit stop in an F1 race, and F1 track is the DevOps. If the pit stop quality team is too slow, that can cost you the team the race. And if they're extremely fast, they're the two differentiators. So one I call the methodology and the other I call the machinery. And both have to come together to give you the speed that is actually required in the world of agile. Hope I answered that, right?
Yeah, I love the analogy. Asmita, what would be your thoughts on agile and DevOps?
I think if you look at Agile Manifesto, right, it says that one of the primary principles is to ship the product, right, as soon as possible, and in fact continuously to the customer. And DevOps accelerates that. So I believe they have shared goals, but then they cater to, as Bhushan said, right, they cater to different aspects of the entire software delivery lifecycle. So I feel they are again, as Bhushan had put in, they are much needed, but they definitely complement and accelerate the entire delivery process.
Yeah,
and I've seen
just...
and from what I look, I've seen testing teams now understand how they fit in both agile as well as the entire DevOps ecosystem, and how they can accelerate and further enhance and enable it.
I like Bhushan's analogy of the F1 track and the pit stop for agile. I'm definitely going to steal that. But I think one of the... Go ahead, you were saying something, Bhushan?
No, that has made the difference, right? Like the 20th century, they used to take more than a minute at the pit stop, and now it's just 1.8 or 1.9 seconds the record. So if the product has to go to the production faster, testing cannot be the bottleneck. And the whole idea of having it automated and make sure that as soon as the developer checks in the code, testing is ready with its feedback, and it doesn't become the bottleneck. That's the whole idea.
Yeah, and just taking a cue from the F1, it's sort of like a supply chain, right? Everything works so smoothly. Coming into the pit stop, you have different teams, changing oil, changing gasoline, changing tires. And I see a question that has popped up into the chat as well, talking about integration of different tools. So let me take that segue for you, Vikul. DevOps and Agile, these are methodologies. So how important is tooling, bringing all of this together?
See, if you look at Gartner or Forrester, they say for DevOps, there are four main pillars. There used to be three, but last 3 years, there are four main pillars: people, process, technology, and culture. The tool aspect is which comes very, very critically impactful in the technology aspect of it. Right? Now, when we talk about tools, there are different functional areas, right? You have requirement management, you have build and continuous integration. Then you have within continuous integration, continuous testing, where you talk about, right, like test execution, test automation. You talk about the security aspect, the performance aspect, and the accessibility aspect, right? And different tools are there in the market, right? One of the things I'm seeing a lot with the US customers is they're looking for tools which are definitely on the cutting edge, which integrate out of the box with a lot of other ecosystem tools, whether open source, whether third party. So that's one aspect. Second is tools are tools. How do you kind of bring in the automation aspect, right, from a continuous testing aspect is very, very important. Requirement to your test case to code to, let's say, your test scenarios to defect to customer feedback. That end-to-end traceability becomes a very critical aspect of DevOps. And from there, right, the testing aspects become relevant. The other thing which I find is most of these tools which we end up using within testing ecosystem should enable the quality gates, because that is an important aspect from a DevOps standpoint.
Got it. Let me build on the tools perspective, and since we're talking about testing, Malika, what have you seen? When people are talking about DevOps platform, what kind of testing tools and testing automation frameworks work best in the DevOps cycle?
Thank you, Manish. Well, firstly, before I start that, so the definition that I have in my mind about DevOps is really a practice which brings together development and operations teams together, right? So when I look at it, it's DevTestOps or DevQOps, where quality engineering is really, or testing is the center point, right, between, or the communication part between development and operations. And one of the frameworks or the strategies that I think works best is the right amount of feedback between the three teams, but enabled as a center point by the testing group. For example, you could have production defects, right, which are found, but in the next release, how are you going to improve the testing, the test suite, and the automation that you do by ensuring that you're testing for these and which come back as a feedback from ops to testing, right? So it's really the process, I think, that enables this feedback and the efficiency between the three teams. So it's working in close cohesion, development, testing, and operations all together, which is one of the key strategies or best practices that I've seen. And the purpose really is, right, from a tooling to manage the end-to-end engineering process. So selecting the right tools which enable collaboration between these three teams, I think that is the second tool or best practice that I would recommend. For example, you can have tools like Selenium integrated with Jenkins, and I mean, it's an endless chain of tools that you could build. And the third most important thing is the monitoring and observability aspect, because I think instant feedback on frequent code drops, right, can be given through this kind of monitoring and observability. And again, there are plenty of tools today that can be brought into your DevOps tooling chain. There's Dynatrace, there's Datadog, Splunk, I mean, name them, right, AppDynamics. And the focus is really on getting code faster to production and minimizing downtime as well because of inefficiently tested code that is then delivered into production. So I think these three things would be pivotal in aligning testing with the DevOps practices.
Got it. And let me just extend that question to you as well, Asmita. Are you seeing customers embrace the whole continuous integration, continuous testing, and continuous deployment? Have they matured to this level, or they're still in the world of, okay, let's first get the developers onto a DevOps platform and then figure out testing?
No, definitely. I think across what we are seeing is that the customers are definitely on board. When it comes to having the entire pipeline set up, and the focus is across. So all teams in line have to be on top of say if you have the best, like say quality is across a shared responsibility now. So say right from development, having the code scan done, or unit automated unit tests, to then how we can have the entire automation test suite, and that too again life cycle test automation, not only about functional. And if I again borrow pointers from Malika, it's also going to be about the culture. It's again not the tool, but how we are using it as well, how we can automate what is right, what is needed, and efficiently, because the efficient the suit, the quicker is going to be the feedback. And again, to the point that Malika mentioned, the shift right aspect of it as well, now we are privy to observability monitoring, which again gives a lot of insights that we never considered a few years ago, right? And I Manish, we discussed that we'll not bring in lambda tests, but look at how we are also listening to the technology, right? That containerization orchestration was brought in from technology perspective, but now we are leveraging it for testing as well and expediting the entire testing. So definitely these are the aspects that have helped in tooling, as well as the approach as well that we take for testing.
Asmita, however hard we stop, a lambda test plays important.
Yeah. So I'm going to breach that rule that Manish had set.
Yeah, I'll stay away from that point. But I think, Malika, you and Asmita talked a lot about, the people and collaboration part. And Vikul, you brought out that Gartner pillar. So are you seeing more of collaboration because of DevOps? Or are you seeing that a lot of the testing pieces have been offloaded from an automation perspective and people are freeing up testing resources? What are you seeing with customers?
See, something Bhushan said earlier when you were asking about DevOps, right? DevOps has completely transformed testing, because prior to that, it was about manual to automated. But with DevOps, the focus is about releasing faster without compromising quality. Now, what used to take 6 months, 3 months, now has to be done bi-weekly, weekly, daily, and sometimes. So from that perspective, right, I see testing has completely evolved, where usage of AI tools and those things have come in. Now, from a maturity standpoint, Manish, right, I see more and more customers using testing, considering testing as a first-class citizen in the DevOps chain. It is not an afterthought anymore, right? Previously, when we used to talk about CI, it would be just build and integrate and kind of promote to the next stage. But now CP has become an important part of CI. So continuous testing is a common discipline I see across customers. The other thing, Manish, you have to keep in mind is, in this world of digital, where a lot of companies are going directly to consumer, this generation is very non-forgiving. So quality becomes all the more important, because if this doesn't work, they have options to go to other clients and so on. So from that perspective, I see a lot of CIOs focusing on quality. Now, DevOps, one other thing which it has done is it has changed the mindset from quality assurance to quality engineering. The world for us, from a quality standpoint, is not running test cases and finding defects. It is about preventing defects. Quality doesn't start after you write the code and you execute test cases. Quality starts the moment your user stories, your requirements are defined. There is a requirement validation, checking a requirement for ambiguity, completeness, conflicts. 37% of your defects are attributed to incomplete requirement. So today, for us, we become, right, in the testing world, we become the custodians of software quality. And it's not about assuring, it is about engineering quality.
That's super interesting, because it is quality engineering, and I saw that in all the conversation I was having with each of you backstage. You only talked about quality engineering more than the quality assurance part. But there is one topic which I hear from customers when I'm talking to them, that they have embraced DevOps, they have got continuous testing in, but they talk to me about a concept called clogged pipelines as far as testing goes. Now, Harleen, I'm going to direct the question to you. What does clogged pipelines really mean? It sounds like a plumbing thing, actually.
No. So it is actually that, right? So if you do collaboration, like whatever is literal meaning, it is that. But just in the context of that it is affecting your progression of code to next stage. So there it is affecting your water supply. So here it is affecting your code supply to the next stage. So that's exactly what it means in a very simple way. Now, so there could be multiple reasons, right? So why it would happen? So you are not able to progress the code to the next stages. So there could be multiple things that I have seen, Manish, happening in the projects. So either it could be, and the underlying reason for all these things is because you have passed that feedback late to the previous stage, right? So either it could be you have inadequate test, and you were able to discover those defects late. Now, before it could move to next stage, there are defects which could not move there. Or you are doing, you don't have enough of automation. You are doing a lot of manual testing, and then you're not able to cover within the given time. Your shift left is not truly implemented, and and then you do not have a lot of progressive automation. See, many times what we are seeing, we want to achieve higher level of progressive automation, but still teams struggle. So with all these things could lead to ultimately a delay in the feedback, and hence impacting the overall deployment cycles. So that's what my understanding, and some of the key reasons why this block testing pipelines come across.
Manish, if I can weigh in, right? Like, see, the CI/CD and automated testing, the whole purpose is to give fast feedback, so that people can fix problems earlier. I think Harleen talked about continuous feedback, early feedback. Now, pipelines, clogged or effective, is just a point of view. Right, from a developer's perspective, who's focused on moving the stories as fast as possible to completion, pipelines are clogged when quality gates cause failures from making progress. But for someone who's responsible for pipelines, like a DevOps evangelist, they're very effective by identifying issues that can be fixed in the early stages of the cycle. The churn and pain we see is pipelines working as intended. One thing to keep in mind is, when garbage goes in, the pipeline can only do two things. Either it can clog, or it can leak that garbage to end clients. It doesn't have the capability to transform that garbage. Now, the way I look at it from a testing standpoint, that if the garbage fails a test, pipeline will stop the shipment, and it'll get the developers the ability to fix. And it is continuous in nature. Now, the question is, what can we do to ensure less garbage comes in? And there, I think Bhushan or someone else talked about shifting left. Garbage will come into your stage if requirement validation is not happening. Design pattern analysis is not happening. You're not enforcing standards to create testable code. You don't have proper branching strategies. You have less of unit test coverage. You're not doing single user performance or performance engineering aspects of things. So I think it is important that rather than being seen as clogged pipelines and the people responsible for clogged pipelines, we help the organization shift left by bringing in some of these best practices as part of operating the pipeline.
So Manish, I just want to add a complementary view to what Harleen and Vikul just brought in. So for me, from code commit to deployment in production, there is usually a fixed time that is given in order to have the most efficient way of production, moving code to production, right? So I think let's think that's about 4 hours or 8 hours that is available. Now, when you have a clogged testing pipeline, it is hogging the time that would be available from the code commit to the deployment. And deploying strategies or technology that can improve testing speed to aid the automation. I think that is another key strategy that one should think of. And there are a lot of technology-oriented strategies. For example, you could have distributed execution in automation, you could have parallel execution, you could have multi-threading. So these days you have all the means to improve the clogged testing pipelines by employing some of these methods to improve the speed of testing itself, so it doesn't really become a bottleneck in the DevOps chain. And to enable this, you also need the availability of your test environments, right? To bring in that end-to-end test execution, the environment availability is equally important as well, along with the strategies you deploy. Because if you are doing parallel execution, you need those many environments to be spun at the click of a button when the deployment of the test code happens in terms of execution. So I think those two, if we are able to manage it better, would definitely help to clear the plumbing problem.
I think that's very insightful what you're saying, Malika, and I'm gonna take what you said and merge it with the F1 track that Bhushan you were talking about. With all of this accelerated delivery and the stuff that Vikul and Malika talked about from a process and tooling perspective, do you think it's putting a lot of strain on testing teams? Not only do they have to write tests and come up with the whole strategy, but also instrument all of this on a DevOps platform?
More than stress is becoming a central point. Testing was in the corner, now it's the focal point. So we should celebrate it rather than being under stress.
Got it. So what's the change in role for a tester, Vikul, in the DevOps world? Let me ask the question in that way.
In fact, I'm in Chicago yesterday. The customer was asking me, he's like, why do we need testers? I will get my developers to do everything. Incidentally, I spent almost 70% of my career on the engineering side and the last 30 on the, so I've seen both sides. The tester of today is very different from the tester of 5, 6, 7 years back. We don't have manual tester concepts anymore, at least where I stand. We have QEs and we have SDETs. So they were like, how is it different from automation engineer? So let's just talk about some of these terms, right? Quality engineering. It's like a discipline, right? Where you're not thinking about assuring, you're thinking about engineering quality from the get-go. Your world is not about writing test cases. It's about at every stage, like I think Harleen or Asmita were talking about, right? Being part of a pod and kind of collaborating with them. SDET is a specific discipline, Manish, which more and more customers are asking for. It's software design engineer at test or in test. Now, this is a term which was coined by Google, Microsoft, but it's now prevalent across sectors, across verticals, in banking and everywhere. What does an SDET do? SDET is a software engineer who has a testing mindset. So when I said that to the customer yesterday, he's like, what does it mean? A developer can't do it? No, a developer is more on the designing side, coding side of things. A tester from the get-go thinks about negative test cases, how to break things. And the role is very, very important because we kind of mimic an end user behavior. We kind of know more than, because testers will only focus on a certain module they're responsible for. Many times, like if we are doing regression or performance, we'll look at end-to-end systems. A lot of time, this is a healthcare customer I'm working with. they kept on talking about domain experts. So I'm like, is that a separate team you have? No. They call them SQAs. Our SQAs are domain experts because they know the system. Developers keep on coming and going. SQAs stay there. They have the best domain knowledge. So the role has evolved. There used to be a time when, Manish, developers would have all the latest tools, right? They're using AI, they're using IDEs, and where were we? We were in Excel sheets. But our world is different. We're using generative AI today to take requirements to test scenarios to test cases to feature file to automation scripts.
Yeah.
That's our world. Our world is not just about test execution. I think Harleen or Malika talked about, right, parallel execution. That's good. That is needed. But many a times we don't have the time to execute everything, even though we have everything. We have only 2 days because developers were 5 days late. So it's about test optimization, intelligent testing. How do we use AI to find the right optimized test set? If only 10% of the code is changing, why do you need to run 800 test cases? Identify those 80 test cases which are impacted. We call it change impact based testing, CIBT. Only run those test cases. Can you tell me using AI what is my defect yield? What is my test yield? We identify test cases in the last 6 months which have yielded 0 defects. So run them later. Run those test cases earlier so that if they fail, you have time to fix them and complete testing on time and release the product on time. I think that's the change I see.
Yeah. I had actually promised myself that I will not bring AI into the conversation. Everybody is talking about it, but since Vikul, you have touched upon it, let me just, peel that away a little bit. So since the topic is DevOps and DevOps is core to automation as well, we're hearing a lot of these code generation tools to, generate test cases as well. Code coverage is becoming more exhaustive. So Harleen, what are you seeing in this space when you are building prototypes or even production grade, code for customers?
Yeah. So Manish, I think, definitely this topic today was not AI, but I think given the scenario that we are right now all operating at, we cannot avoid this topic in whatever conversation we are having, right? So while I think there's a lot of experiments, a lot of hype, everything together, it's not completely hype because there are outcomes which are being shown around AI. But still, I think what we need to understand, a lot of these things are not yet fully ready for enterprise deployments, right? A lot of these models, what we are even talking about the generative AI, etc., have been trained on a lot of domains which are in open. But if I take, and I'm telling based upon my experience, if I take some of those things to my customers today, are they able to give the outcome which we are expecting? No, right? And even the code that is being generated, and in fact, to quote that experiments that we have done with even Git Copilot, the kind of, and on one of the specific products, etc. The first level, as is, if you see, the code generation would be like 40% accuracy, and the quality, everything, and it needs a lot of training that needs to be done on those your core models. So which means that you're just shifting the effort which you are doing in something else now in training that effort, obviously to get that ROI. So I think there are a lot of people who are very impatient to get that ROI. You really have to wait, right? So you cannot expect an ROI just take out of box that AI model and it will give the ROI. The investment has to be made to give it your context of your specific enterprise context, because I think all of us are working in enterprise grade applications and specific enterprises. So that effort has to be put in, and then I think the kind of quality or the outcome that we are expecting would slowly evolve. But I think we are still in the early stages of seeing a 100% success on some of these things.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. A lot of experimentation is happening. People are trying to understand how they can use it. And it goes back to, Vikul, what you said, using AI to speeden up a lot of manual activities, right? Identify which test cases to run based on the change of code that has happened. Don't run everything. Again, goes back to what Malika, you were saying, because you have that window of 4 hours to release code, right? Quickly figure out what is the impact of the commit that a certain developer has done, and just run that kind of a test case. Let me step back from AI and come back to the DevOps topic that we're all here for. So how does one get started? Asmita, let me put that question to you. I'm sure there are lots of organizations and practitioners in the audience who are going through that journey of coming onto the DevOps world. How should they start? How should they think about structuring the process, the blueprint, the people that Bikul mentioned earlier?
Sure. So I think, from onboarding, like I'll speak for the QE community, right? When you want to, say onboard on the DevOps journey, let us, go into the people process and then the, technology side. We'll have to, understand the goals, what is it, how is it that we would want, what is it, that we would want to achieve, and, what is the path we intend to take. If I talk, from the QE or, the testing perspective, right? We talked about, like I'll keep going back to, shift left testing. So we talked about, how we have tools, etc., etc. But I am a huge proponent of, and again I agree with Vikul as well, that once there is garbage in, it clogs the testing practices completely. However, what I so hence, when it comes to DevOps, I would want the QE community to be aware of the left side of it, that what are the practices that should be done before the code is comes into the QE bucket. So say how we can have the static code analysis done, how we can have automated unit tests done, being aware about these aspects, what are the tools that can enable us to in this phase, is something very important that we should be aware of. In testing as well, definitely there's plethora of tools available. However, choosing the right tool that would cater to the current need or the current product that we are testing, and optimum test automation as well. I still see a lot of our teams chasing test coverage. It's still one of the golden metrics that we chase. However, how we can optimize the testing itself, how we can test what the user sees and not as opposed to the automatic tests that we see, so that we again ensure the success of quicker execution and quicker feedback, right? And also at the same time, the entire how once you give a go ahead from the functional side of it, how you can have the entire performance engineering, including the testing as well as the monitoring part of it. We say DevSecOps, it's not even DevOps, it's DevSecOps, and now heading into platform engineering. So how we integrate the entire life cycle of testing as well into these. There are so many bespoke solutions that we develop, but how we can enable these solutions to I'll talk to or to integrate seamlessly with these with the entire pipeline. Like for example, the approach that we take in order to develop tools is how we can develop these tools which are microservice enabled, even the testing tools and accelerators, so that it can talk to any framework any given point in time, and we can still harp on its benefits. So how different types of testing could be automated should be a thought process. And then yes, the right side of it as to what all are the observability monitoring tools that we should be aware of, and what feedback to take from, what to look for, right? Say these days in shift, right, we are experimenting, like loss is one of the aspects, right, where we are experimenting, bringing the applications down deliberately, and then learning how is it that the products react, right, when in adversity. So all these this is the end-to-end cycle I would want all of us to be aware of, and then onboard gradually.
Well, sounds like a lot of things for a testing team to do. I'm going to ask a controversial question to you, Bhushan. Since everybody in the panel has been talking about automation, speed of delivery of software, does that mean that manual testing is no longer required in the age of DevOps?
See, manual testing as such may not be required going forward, but whatever you do, right, the speed is important. So with Gen AI and other topics, I don't think so there is something called as manual testing. all the activities. Earlier, the automation was limited to only execution automation. Now there is design automation. Now with Gen AI, even the requirement gathering is automated. So automation is given, right? So how do you apply automation and how you optimize before automation is more important.
Manish, I have a slightly different view, right? Not everything can be automated. Let's accept that, right? I think just building on what Bhushan said, I think your manual automation, your manual testing needs to be minimal.
Would
You
that
should
not
always
create
try.
a pipeline, Vikul?
Sorry?
Would that not create a clogged pipeline in DevOps if you're doing manual testing?
You just estimate your testing timeline accordingly. I have yet to see a customer where everything is 100% automated. Pick up any industry, banking, you still have legacy systems. Insurance, you still have claims being done on legacy systems, right? Even for that matter, Google and Microsoft have a bit of manual testing. How do I know? Because I'm doing testing for them. So there is manual testing, there is a need, but that has to be minimal. What is important is, even manual testing, you should find out how to minimize that, right? Using some of the AI tools capabilities you have. Like if there are 800 test cases, do you really need to run 800 test cases? Can you boil it down to only 8 or 10 or 18 or whatever the number is? So that's what I'm seeing on ground, right? With a lot of customers I'm spending time with. But I'd love to hear any opposing views if someone.
Little bit like supporting thing what Vikul you just said, and I'll take a specific example like why some of those manual as of now has not gone away completely, right? So if you take example of accessibility testing, so we do have tools which can automatically do accessibility testing, but does it mean that you do not need people with those special abilities and disabilities to really test that? Can you replace that with automation? I doubt. That has not happened yet, but maybe as we mature. So that is a very specific example. And similarly for usability, you cannot totally automate and ignore some of those aspects. Yeah, see, what we keep focusing more from the functional automation, the features are working, functionality is working, but somehow these non-functional kind of things we tend to ignore. So that's, I think, something I want to bring.
Yeah, so just to conclude that manual testing may not be done just by testers. It might come with a T or a pi kind of a talent. For example, if you want to do a certain banking process which cannot be automated, you need to be a domain expert. So what I meant is plain vanilla, as I say, 1T pi X, the starting one. I want to make a career in manual testing. I would say no. I would rather have some other skills which I will deploy and then make it testing. And that's again an automation kind of a thing, because I want to automate some of the stuff. And even to write in Gen AI's world, even writing a right prompt would require a lot of skills. So prompt assurance will be one big topic going forward. Right.
Yeah.
So
I also I also want to take Vikul's challenge and say that what I believe is wherever there is code, there is an opportunity to automate, right? So whether it's the setup of infrastructure, you have IAC, you can automate infrastructure test environments. So I believe that wherever code is there, you can automate it to the largest extent possible, and that's what we kind of strive to do, whether it's performance, resilience, infrastructure, and not just focusing on functional alone, but all the other elements as well. But however, if there is a lack of availability or exposure to the code itself, then that exercise to automate becomes a little difficult. But I would say, go with the fact that every bit of code can be automated today.
I think Harleen, I really like the way Harleen gave an example, right? Like there are certain aspects you can't automate, right? Like accessibility is one aspect. A lot of customers do ground truth collection assurance that can't be automated. You do crowd testing. We tend not to do that because it's all for real user feedback, right? As in, you can't automate an end user actions because users will differ on how they act. So there are things, but I think the bottom line we all are saying is What can be automated should be automated. 100% agreed.
So how does
But
this
what
look like
should-
in DevOps, Mikul? Sorry to interrupt you. So how does this look like in DevOps? So are you saying in your DevOps pipeline, you will put an interrupt? Okay, this needs to be manually tested. I'm just trying to visualize this.
If anyone thinks pipelines are fully automated, touchless pipelines, I think that's something which I've seen probably for 5 or 10% of the customers I've worked, right, in all my last 4 or 5 companies. And those are Amazons of the world, the Spotifys of the world, the PayPals of the world, right? But then to get to that, Manish, because when you talk about DevOps, there are 3 key aspects: continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment. I would say 80 to 90% of the customers we work with are happy with continuous delivery, which means when you commit a code, it automatically gets built, promoted up to pre-production, right? From there, I think there are manual triggers for it to be promoted. New York Times, everything is ready, but only Wednesday publish. Whereas for Amazons of the world, those are the ones which look to kind of have completely automated pipelines, touchless pipelines, right? But then the nature of those applications are also such, like Malika said, can be fully automated. They don't have the aspects of, because their accessibility principles are such that they've standardized that. They don't have legacy systems in the play. So in those kind of customers, continuous deployment is key. There, every code commit automatically gets pushed to production. So there, I think you go to that aspect.
So Manish, that brings us to the point as to when you ask what can be a successful strategy for automation. It is closely coupled with what Vikul just said about the kind of architecture. The more decoupled, more microservices architecture you have, I see one of the successful strategy is the testing pyramid approach. Traditionally, you do a lot of testing at the end UI, right? But with modularization coming in, unit testing and integration testing and API testing becomes very fast, very obvious. You can keep the UI testing to the end of it. So my CI/CD pipeline can be clubbed with unit API testing, which is headless testing. Most of the algorithm being consumed in this layer. Definitely, that's one of the best practices, right? And then your end-to-end UI testing, which can be beyond the pipeline, can be done. And there, it is little less riskier, or I would say most of the bugs are caught early. Most of the feedback is got early. The UI testing now is open for exploratory, accessibility, and all those kinds of testing which you want to open to the world and take crowds helping. So this is how I flip the pyramid.
Manish, on the question of, right, I think your basic question was, right, like there is manual, how will it kind of play with the whole pipeline concept? There are so many other things which are manual. Your release gating decisions are many times manual because you can't just risk it to a single index. You have to look at, okay, security bugs. How many of them can I allow? How many of them are critical, not critical? There is a manual aspect to pipelines too, especially from a release gating standpoint. And if there is a manual testing component involved, they plan for it. The timeline plans for it.
Got it. So looking at this imperfect world, especially when all of you talked about legacy applications, how should somebody start with DevOps and putting testing into it? Malika, let me put that question to you, because let's say I'm an organization in the audience today. I have my testing team, I have my development team, and now I'm thinking about, okay, DevOps sound interesting. I need to sort of put everybody on the same platform to collaborate. What's the starting point?
I think the first thing one should watch out for is really the alignment of all the stakeholders to the culture of the organization. Because I think the single most important thing to make you successful is the culture. So if the culture is top down and the culture is to go DevOps or Agile, then I think the success across stakeholders to align and go by it becomes, that's the first step that one can take. But beyond that, I think the challenge lies with bringing the right skill set and talent, like Harleen also touched upon. And today, because within bringing test automation or testing within the DevOps cycle, you need to think of multiple skills. There's test automation, there's infrastructure testing, there's CI/CD, delivery practices. So bringing that skill set and talent is, the second most important thing that one has to focus on, as well as integrating the tool chain itself. So I think these are a few things that one needs to watch out for when looking at how to optimize, the testing practices within DevOps. But to bring it all together, I think developing that unique testing strategy at the start, which adapts to the tech landscape, because what I've heard everybody say is the landscape can be so diverse. You can have mainframes, you can have SaaS or COTS apps, you can have cloud native build-up of apps, right? So there's pretty much every technology today. So a unique testing strategy that adapts to this technology landscape that is unique for you, with the right selection of the tooling that aids the kind of execution that you want to bring without having clogged pipelines. I think that is, what would work for organizations.
And Harleen, what have you seen not work? Yeah, go ahead, Vikram.
No, I actually sent a blog post. I wrote one for DevOps.com on the exact same topic. Personally, successful DevOps transformations I've seen are the ones where there is a healthy balance between top-down and bottom-up. Because if the teams in pods, whether it is developers, testers, operations, BAs, they don't understand why, and it's something the CIO is pushing down, it won't work. It won't work in the time frame you want it to. Eventually, maybe 3 years later, 4 years later, 5 years later, it will. And the other thing I think is, so the top-down and bottom-up alignment is very important. Second is the 4 pillars we talked about, right? Process. You need to make sure there is process standardization. One of the problems we find is there is no standardization. So if you are taking unoptimized processes and creating pipelines, so it will still hog you down from a speed and agility standpoint. From a people perspective, right, like you need to upskill your resources, right? Make sure that your manual resources are getting trained, transformed into QE to SDEX. From a tool perspective, I think your tool selection and standardization. I've been in customers where for service socialization, they have 5 tools. For TDM, they have 3 tools, right? And they don't know, right, like which ones to go with. How do you integrate them? How do you get them to talk? Because for DevOps, integrated pipeline is going to be important. The integrated tool chain is going to be important, because one of the key aspects of DevOps is transparency and visibility. You need to know where your release is. And that traceability, like I said initially, requirement to code to test case to defect to customer feedback is important. And the last part is the culture. You need, I can speak from a testing standpoint, you need to have a collaborative culture. You need to be able to shift left, shift right, shift up, and shift deep within, right? Shift up is where you connect with the business, understand what is the key goal. Shift up is also connecting with the end user, where now testing teams look at operation logs to understand how is the user using the system. Are we even testing it that way? Is the product being built that way, right? And testing within is where you optimize. Shift left and right, I think we have talked about, right? How we shift right to work with the operations team to help with triaging, shift left, work with the development and the BA teams with the requirement validation, test optimization, things like those. So I think that is very important.
I can clearly see you're very passionate about this topic, Vikram. It's coming out. It's coming out. Ali, let me ask you, what have you seen not work? What are the challenges that customers who you work with faced when integrating the testing practices with DevOps?
Yeah, so I think that's one very conventional notion that most of our customers, and I know how much of this is true, but many times that we keep hearing, is that testing is slowing us down. Okay, if only because the thinking is different, right? So they want to go fast, they want to hit the production fast, right? They want to release the features fast. And obviously, as a quality gate at that perspective, we cannot allow that to move to the next stage. And the perception that gets built is testing is slowing us down. So that's, I think, one of the key thing that challenge that from the testing point of view. Second, I think it has been spoken a lot by all my co-panelists about the culture, because this whole shift on the culture, of collaboration, truly shifting left. See, one is that putting the strategies, putting those methodologies, etc. But everything boils down. I think Malika very nicely put that out. That it boils down to the culture, because there could be 1,000 guidelines, but if I'm not willing to follow, or if I have some different mindset, my mindset is not aligned, then the testing team will follow challenges, right? They will face those challenges, is what I have seen. Right? And then third is, still extending that mindset thing. Though these testers are involved in those, scrums, pods, and all that, sometimes that importance or that authority that they get to challenge some of things that were being done, that's another thing I've seen on the ground, where they really have to fight their way out to say that no, I do not approve of this, or this is not right way of moving ahead. So I think those are very practical challenges, and mostly it's not about the technical skills, it's not about other things, it's more about the mindset, the culture, where there are perceptions built about how testing is done. So that's Manish what I've seen in a lot of the customers which I work closely with.
Got it. Thank you. I know we're almost at time. What I wanted to do was to get each one of you a minute each, just to give your views on, what should everybody watch out for in the audience as they go through this whole DevOps and testing merge. Malika, maybe I can start with you because I see you on the screen.
Sure. I think I just want to quote Charles Darwin on this, where he says, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change." Right? So I think I would conclude with that thought, where while you adopt the right strategy, testing strategy for bringing in DevOps, you have to keep in mind that build something that is most adaptable to your organization to make it successful. And every organization is different. They have different challenges. There's no one size fits all. So you need to adapt to the kind of technology you have and build that right kind of DevOps tooling chain that will make you successful.
Thank you. I love the quote. Herleen?
Yeah, so I'll just take a clue from what Malika said, right, on the adapting. So I also love that, Malika. Thanks for sharing that. It's again the same thing. So I will make it more specific, on the automation, because that becomes, the speed becomes very important. So if you invest on the right kind of automation, the continuous feedback, and there I think we did speak about how can you bring the latest and greatest of technologies that are evolving. Today it is AI, tomorrow it will be something else. But having that adaptability, that smartness to improve whatever you are doing, right? So little bit improvements in the processes, a little bit and little more collaboration rather than doing a lot of things in silos, because ultimately it's the same mutual priorities that everybody is working on. So that's what I would like to say, Manish.
Yeah, thanks. I think if we had more time, I would have spoken a lot more about collaboration. I think that's one point of DevOps we've not spoken about in this panel, but maybe for another time. Bhushan, your thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, thanks. I should have started with that, but let me end it for getting such specialists on board. We get to learn a lot from each one of you. See, one thing that Vikul just touched, right? It's all about culture, right? And how do we foster collaboration and make everyone responsible for quality? The word testing and quality go hand in hand is a myth. Testing never improves the quality or decreases the quality, it just shows the quality, right? So in a way, quality is everybody's responsibility. It's like that boy whose whole village is responsible to take care, and hence we advocate in Wipro something called as a democratization of quality, and that is nothing but the spirit with which we should approach our strategy, and then it follows with the collaboration, and tools actually supplement that collaboration. For example, take a TDD kind of an approach, take a pipeline. All these tools come into picture, but the people who use it, if they're not aligned to this collaboration mentality, right, and that's where it breaks. And they say tool chain broke, tool chain never breaks. Technology is always ahead. The process and people are always catching up. That's one message to the leadership.
Thank you, Bhushan. Asmita?
Sure. So I think, so Bhushan, definitely I have to say this. You have put it really well. When you define testing and quality, I think it completely resonated, and I'll definitely borrow that. So Manish, from my side, what I'll say is, if I take cues from Malika, Helene, and Bhushan, I'll take a step back or shift left and say that. So we talked about continuous integration, deployment, delivery, testing. I think continuous learning is going to be equally important for the entire fraternity to be, say, watchful of where is it that the industry is heading into, learning the technology side of it, so that we can test or have the entire quality structure around it done in the best way is again going to be the key. How we stay in touch with the technology and the industry and have our own mechanisms drawn out.
Absolutely. Technology will keep on changing forever. Vikul, your thoughts?
My first thought is be very proud of being in the quality world. I remember when I was a Java developer, right, QA was seen as something probably developers didn't want to do. But ours is a very hip world now. There is the word engineering associated with us now, quality engineering. Also, be very proud in this digital world. You are the custodians of software quality. You don't slow pipelines. You enable and empower successful products to go out. Just to put things in perspective, go talk to a CIO who, I won't name the company, but they were losing 65,000 clients a week during Obamacare launch because of a small software glitch. I remember in a room with him where he was ready to pay $9 to $10 million to stop that bleeding. Go talk to your kids who are 19, 20 years old. Look at how they operate. I talked about this. Quality is very important in the digital world because options are easily available. Something doesn't work, something is slow, they delete it from their phone and they go to the next one. We ensure customer stickiness by ensuring quality product. That will be my view, Manish.
Thanks, Vikul. Thank you, everybody. I think in summary, what I would like to say is DevOps is here to stay. The most important part of DevOps is culture, as all of you talked about. It's collaboration, because the objective of the whole team, whether it is SDATs, whether it is QE teams or whoever, it's about shipping software to the customer. So I think collaboration is the most important thing for DevOps, and obviously getting all the processes right so that this works like a smooth supply chain to ship software faster. With that, thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing their experiences and talking to the audience here today. And thank you, audience, for all the questions. I've been reading them. Do drop the question to the link that my team has shared. We'll make sure that we answer them for you as well. Thank you so much, and have a great day, evening, night, and a wonderful conversation with other panelists today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Manish.
Thanks, Manish.
Thank you.